What's up everybody, welcome back. Now with the Nintendo Switch Mini and Switch Pro or enhanced version of the Nintendo Switch being a hot topic lately, and all the news circulating around it with the retail listings for the accessories for the Switch Mini. If you've been following my channel since early 2018, this information has gone from just basically me talking about it and bringing out job descriptions and things like that, pointing to new hardware, to now it being real information basically that everyone's talking about and expecting Nintendo to announce these new consoles as soon as next month in July. So there's been a lot of speculation about what type of chips both these consoles could be using. I heard everything from custom chips to basically using another Tegra X1. For the Nintendo Switch enhanced version, most people seem to agree that they would be using a custom chip, it would be more powerful, and Nintendo would be doing this to combat piracy and things like that. However, I've seen a lot of people assume that the Nintendo Switch Mini variant would simply be using a cut down, shrunken down Tegra X1 processor and basically run games in handheld mode and leave it at that. The reason given I've heard people say that Nintendo would do that is because it would cut down costs and it would basically be a lot easier to do and to sell that way with this cheaper and smaller variant of the Nintendo Switch. Now that sounds all well and good, right, when you think about it, but the interesting thing is to point out about this that was recently brought to my attention by one of my colleagues that I was discussing this information with, is that the Nintendo Switch Mini is most likely going to be a completely customized chip as well, and on top of that it will most likely be the same type of chip being used in the Nintendo Switch enhanced version, due to the fact that Nintendo was informing developers of not only the enhanced version of this Nintendo Switch, but also they have been informing the developers of this Nintendo Switch Mini as well. So if Nintendo has been informing developers of the Nintendo Switch Mini, there would be no reason for them to do that if they were simply able to just release their current games on the Nintendo Switch in handheld mode, and that's it, because Nintendo Switch currently has multiple profiles, one being handheld mode and docked mode. So for a Nintendo Switch Mini console, all a developer would need to do, they wouldn't even necessarily need to have a brand new dev kit. All they would need to do is just release their current games on the Nintendo Switch, and the same games would just work automatically on the Nintendo Switch Mini variant if it was using the exact same technology as the current Nintendo Switch, just in a smaller form factor. So there would be no need for them to even have a dev kit in order for them to get their games working on this new Nintendo Switch Mini, unless it was a new language and new architecture that the system was using. Then yes, Nintendo would need to inform these developers that a new Nintendo Switch console or consoles was coming, and that the language and architecture of these consoles was different enough, it was customized enough, that they would definitely need to have brand new dev kits going forward that were not the same as the current variant, because these consoles will not be running games in the same way that the original Nintendo Switch was. Now we have actual proof to back this up, and I'm going to show you this in this video. But first I want to show you that I did talk about this in detail a little bit back in April of this year, 2019. Take a look at what I said. But when I say that anything could be used, that is actually true. And here's the reason why. What you're seeing right here is the Yuzu emulator that is running games like Super Mario Odyssey, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and other games like that on the Switch at higher resolutions and are now fully playable on PCs that have no architectural similarities to the Nintendo Switch. And this emulator was developed by, I believe, less than 10 guys in the last year and a half or so, and they are the same people who developed the Citra emulator for the Nintendo 3DS. And when you create emulators, you have to use your own code from scratch, or else if you are using Nintendo's own SDK code, that is illegal, because that can only legally be used by Nintendo for their own games. So this is an emulator they built from scratch in less than 2 years, and it is running at nearly full speed for these games on PC. So the custom chip that Nintendo could be using for the Switch Pro could actually be something completely different than what they're using for the original Nintendo Switch, and could still withhold the backwards compatibility on it due to that Tegra X1 processor being now over 4 years old, and the technology of that chip is very well known. Obviously that chip has been thoroughly hacked. It's a very common language that it uses in its code and in how it's developed. So while I'm not saying that it is not using NVIDIA or it's using something else, I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is that the chip could be surprising in that it is technologically possible that it could be using something completely different than what the original Switch is based on, and still get the job done with emulation from the original Nintendo Switch. And Nintendo may want to do that because of that Tegra X1 processor being so easily hacked. They may not want to have anything to do with that chip at all. Maybe not anything even architecturally similar at all to that chip either. They may not even want to have that. As long as they can get the games running in emulation, they may in fact do that with a different type of chip. And if they did do that, this would not be the first time that a handheld device had a completely different architecture and ran the previous console in backwards compatibility mode. And the console that did that was the PlayStation Vita. It ran some of the original PlayStation Portable games in backwards compatibility mode on the PlayStation Vita with a completely different CPU and GPU on it. The PlayStation Vita runs an ARM Cortex-A9 processor and a PowerVR GPU, which is completely different than what the PSP was using in 2004. Of course, it didn't run those UMD discs that the PSP had. It was able to run the digital download games on a PlayStation Vita. So there's one thing I want to update to that information I was talking about with the emulation aspect that Nintendo could be doing for these new versions of the Switch, whether it be the Mini or the enhanced version itself. What I said there is that it is illegal for someone to use Nintendo's own code to emulate their games on a PC. But for Nintendo to do that, they have full access to their own code, so they can emulate anything they want and make it as customized as they want for their own consoles. And now we have actual proof that maybe they are doing just that for these new Nintendo Switch variants. And like I talked about before, they may want to move away completely from anything related to that Tegra X1 processor, make something completely new and customized for both these new Nintendo Switch variants that could quite possibly be using the same chip, in my opinion. Maybe one just scaled down, scaled back for the Switch Mini, and one brand new one, of course, that it's based on. It's kind of like its bigger brother, basically. So take a look at this here. What I have found is that Nintendo is actually working on a system or piece of hardware that will be using a Virtio driver, VIRTIO driver, for a piece of hardware coming up soon that they are releasing. This is a contract position that they hired for back in April 2019, and the description of duty says that this position involves working in a small team focused on design and development of a secure computing architecture. Much of the initial work will be focused on leveraging the Virtio driver standard in an architecture featuring a Type 1 hypervisor. The scope of work includes clean sheet software design and implementations, well beyond simply integrating existing open source components. So if you're not familiar with what a Virtio driver is, what it is essentially a driver that allows a piece of hardware to run any type of operating system in virtualization, basically emulation. It is emulating a operating system. And the summary of requirements of this position even talks about basic operating concepts such as system calls, processes, IPC, preferred skills, OS virtualization concepts, including Virtio driver model, are requirements and preferred skills that Nintendo wants for this position. And remember, this is for hardware that's already in existence. So they already got their hardware, they're implementing the drivers, and on top of that, this is a contract position. And I've talked to a few people behind the scenes about this type of work, and that basically this takes just a few months to implement, and they have a small team basically here. So when you put all this together, it makes perfect sense that they are actually going to be using this structure for the new Nintendo Switch variants coming out to release this fall or holiday or early 2020 when they're all finally released, because most likely those pieces of hardware are already done. They're ready to go. They have them, they're working on them. All they need to do is implement the drivers and the software needed to run the operating system. And that looks like exactly what they have been doing these past few months, getting all those things ready. And most likely, in my point of view, I think this position will remain open, even if they have already filled the position basically with enough people. Since it's a contract position, I do think they will leave this position open until both systems are basically released, because usually when a hardware manufacturer or when a company releases a new console, they want as many people on board as possible, just in case, someone gets sick or they're not able to do certain work or they get another job. They want as many people as possible, all hands on deck, to make sure this console or consoles are ready to go on launch day. So here we have possible proof that both the Nintendo Switch Mini and the Nintendo Switch Pro or enhanced model will in fact be using two custom SOCs that will most likely be related to each other, and they will be emulating the Nintendo Switch operating system upon release, which means that these two consoles could be completely different than what you're expecting. And based on all this information, I'm not saying for a fact that it is one way or another, but it doesn't look like Nintendo would be using a Tegra X1 based processor on either of these new consoles due to all the issues that we've discussed already and all the problems Nintendo has already had well documented. I don't think either of these brand new consoles, both of them, would be using something related to that chip. From the looks of it, both of them are going to be completely customized, and they're going to be different enough from the Tegra X1 processor, different enough from the Tegra Parker chip, and possibly even different enough from the Xavier chip, because all three of those chips are very similar, with the Xavier chip being the most powerful of the three. All of them should not have any problem running the Switch operating system natively. So it looks like they're implementing the drivers needed for these new pieces of hardware to run the Nintendo Switch operating system on a different type of chip. So this is really interesting information in order to get the current games running on there just fine, and to also eliminate piracy, and of course to make any type of increases in performance for either of these consoles. All these things are very much possible now that we see all this information coming out into the forefront before these consoles are announced. Alright guys, let me know what you think about all this. Are you excited for the new Nintendo Switch consoles that are going to be announced soon? Are you going to pick one up? Are you looking for the mini version? Are you looking for the enhanced version? Let me know which one you're thinking of picking up for yourselves. And if you did enjoy this video, please hit the like button, subscribe for more, and I'll talk to you very soon in the next video. Have a great day.